Most people feel safe in their own homes, believing that the walls around them protect them from the outside world. But what if someone was watching you the whole time, without you even knowing? Tonight, you'll hear 3 disturbing true stories of spy cameras hidden in plain sight, capturing moments no one ever wanted recorded. These stories aren't just creepy. They're terrifying reminders that sometimes the real horror is already inside your home. It was the summer of 2019 when Eric, a 26-year-old college student, moved into a new apartment just outside his university. He had been searching for something affordable, and when he found a 1-bedroom unit listed at a surprisingly low rent, he jumped on it. The landlord was a middle-aged man who seemed rushed during their only meeting. He barely gave Eric a turgist, handed him the keys, mumbled something about paying rent on the first of each month, and left. At the time, Eric didn't think much of it. He was just excited to finally have a place of his own. For the first week, everything seemed fine. The apartment was old, but clean enough. Eric spent most of his time setting up his gaming PC, hanging posters, and buying cheap furniture from thrift stores. The only strange thing he noticed was that the smoke detector in the living room seemed newer than everything else in the apartment. The walls were yellowed, the carpet stained, and the kitchen appliances looked like they hadn't been replaced in 20 years. But that smoke detector looked brand new, with a tiny red light blinking every few seconds. One night, after staying up late playing games, Eric fell asleep on the couch. Around 3 a.m., he woke up suddenly with the feeling that someone was watching him. He sat up, heart racing, and scanned the room. Nothing seemed out of place. He laughed nervously at himself, blaming too much caffeine, and went to bed. But that uneasy feeling lingered. The next few days, Eric started noticing small things. He would leave his keys on the counter, only to find them on the coffee table later. His controller, which he always left by the TV, was found on the kitchen counter one morning. He lived alone, so there was no one else who could have moved them. He began to wonder if maybe he was just forgetful, but deep down, something didn't feel right. One evening, his friend Jason came over to hang out. They ordered pizza and watched a movie. Halfway through, Jason pointed at the smoke detector and asked, "Dude, why is there a light blinking on that thing? That doesn't look like a smoke detector light. It looks more like a camera." Eric froze. He had never thought of that. He got up on a chair, pulled the detector down, and to his horror, there was a small lens behind the plastic cover. It wasn't connected to the building's wiring, just a self-powered camera disguised as a smoke detector. Eric felt sick to his stomach. Jason told him to check the rest of the apartment. They searched every corner, and in the bathroom, they found another one, this time hidden inside what looked like a towel hook on the wall. Eric's hands shook as he unscrewed it, revealing yet another lens. Someone had been watching him, recording him. Eric immediately wanted to call the police, but Jason advised him to first check where the cameras were transmitting. They grabbed a laptop and some free software to scan for wireless signals. Sure enough, there were 2 hidden networks broadcasting from inside the apartment. Someone nearby was receiving the live feed. At that moment, a horrifying realization hit Eric. Whoever had installed these cameras could be watching them right now. They unplugged everything, packed a few essentials, and left the apartment in a rush. Eric was terrified to even go back in. The next morning, he returned with the police. When they searched the apartment more thoroughly, they discovered 4 cameras in total. 1 in the smoke detector, 1 in the bathroom hook, 1 in the air vent, and another hidden in the light fixture of his bedroom. All of them had memory cards, storing hours of footage. The police confiscated everything and opened an investigation. The landlord was brought in for questioning, but he denied everything. He claimed he had no idea how the cameras got there and insisted that maybe the last tenant installed them. But the police weren't convinced. When they checked the memory cards, they found videos not just of Eric, but of multiple past tenants, people who had lived there before him. The landlord had been spying on his renters for years. Eric was horrified. He couldn't sleep for days, imagining all the times he had been in that apartment changing clothes, showering, sleeping while someone sat in another room, or maybe even next door, watching every move. He felt violated in a way he couldn't describe. Even though the landlord was eventually arrested and charged with invasion of privacy, Eric never truly recovered from the experience. He moved in with Jason for a while, too scared to live alone. To this day, he refuses to stay in any rental without first inspecting every corner. He checks smoke detectors, towel hooks, even alarm clocks. Because once you've been watched like that, once you realize someone saw you at your most vulnerable moments, you can never truly feel safe again. In 2015, a young married couple named Hannah and Marcus decided to take a week-long vacation to celebrate their 2-year anniversary. They booked a cozy Airbnb cabin in the mountains of Colorado. The listing looked perfect: rustic wooden walls, a fireplace, and a big window overlooking the forest. The reviews were glowing, with guests praising how peaceful and private the place felt. When they arrived, the host, a cheerful woman in her 50s, greeted them briefly and handed them the keys. She mentioned she lived nearby in case they needed anything. Hannah noticed the woman seemed a little too enthusiastic about them staying there, but brushed it off as friendliness. The first night was peaceful. They made dinner together, played board games, and sat by the fire until they fell asleep on the couch. But Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't entirely alone. She told Marcus she felt like someone was watching them, but he laughed it off, saying she was just spooked by being out in the woods. The next morning, while unpacking, Hannah noticed something odd in the bedroom. On the nightstand, there was a digital alarm clock facing the bed. Nothing unusual except that when the sunlight hit it at a certain angle, she thought she saw a tiny lens behind the black screen. She mentioned it to Marcus, who didn't believe her at first. To prove her wrong, he picked it up and examined it. But as he tilted it under the light, his expression changed. There was indeed a small pinhole camera hidden inside. Marcus immediately unplugged the clock and set it aside. The discovery made them both uneasy, but they tried to convince themselves maybe it was just an old clock. Later, they learned the horrifying truth. The Airbnb host and her husband had been running the operation for years. They installed spy cameras in all of their rental properties, secretly recording their guests' private moments and selling the photage online. Investigators found terabytes of video files stored on hard drives in their home, with folders labeled by dates and even by guest names. When Hannah and Marcus were told this, they felt sick to their stomachs. The idea that strangers had access to their most intimate, private moments was unbearable. Hannah cried for days, and Marcus was consumed with anger. Even though the couple was eventually arrested, neither Hannah nor Marcus felt any sense of closure. The worst part was knowing that once something is uploaded online, it never truly disappears. They had no way of knowing how much of their footage had already been shared, how many people had watched them without their consent, or if those videos would ever resurface. It was a permanent violation. For months after, Hannah developed severe anxiety. She refused to stay in hotels or Airbnb, even when they visited relatives. She would cover every smoke detector and unplug any electronic device she thought might contain a camera. Marcus tried to reassure her, but deep down, he felt the same fear. Every time he saw a blinking light on an electronic device, his stomach tightened. What was supposed to be a romantic anniversary getaway had turned into a nightmare that haunted them for years. Their trust in privacy, in the safety of four walls, was shattered forever. Back in 2017, a woman named Claire was finishing her last semester of nursing school. She lived in a small apartment near campus, but wanted a quieter place to study for her final exams. She found a listing for a student-friendly studio on a popular rental site. The pictures looked decent, the rent was fair, and the landlord seemed friendly enough during their short phone call. He told her the place was safe, quiet, and perfect for a young professional. That was all she needed to hear. When Claire moved in, everything seemed normal. The apartment was sparsely furnished, with plain white walls and cheap carpeting, but it was clean. The landlord had even provided a small TV and a wall-mounted clock. For the first few days, she studied peacefully, finally feeling like she had the focus she needed. But one night, while lying in bed, Claire noticed something odd. The wall clock above the TV gave off a faint red glow. At first she thought it was just the reflection of a street light, but when she turned off all the lights in the apartment, the glow remained small, steady, and unmistakable. It looked exactly like the kind of red dot you'd see on a recording. Device thought her stomach dropped. Trying to calm herself, she got up on a chair and took the clock down. At first glance, it looked normal, but when she examined it closely, her heart started pounding. Behind the clear plastic face of the clock, tucked near the number 12, was a small, dark lens. She immediately called her friend Melissa, who lived nearby. Melissa rushed over, and together they began searching the apartment. They turned off the lights, used their phone flashlights, and scanned the room carefully. What they found made Claire want to scream. There was a hidden camera inside the smoke detector above her bed. Another one disguised as a USB charging block plugged into the outlet near her desk. And worst of all, there was a camera inside the vent above the bathroom mirror, positioned perfectly to record anyone showering or changing. Claire was shaking uncontrollably by the time they finished. She felt violated, even though she had only been there for a few days. How much of her had already been recorded? Melissa told her not to stay another night in that apartment. They gathered Claire's belongings as quickly as they could and left, heading straight to Melissa's place. The next morning, they went to the police with the cameras they had found. The police took the matter seriously and launched an investigation. What they uncovered was worse than either of them had imagined. The landlord, the same man who had rented the place to Claire, had been operating an elaborate surveillance scheme for years. Every single unit he rented had hidden cameras installed. He wasn't just watching his tenants, he was storing the videos and streaming some of them online under fake accounts. When investigators searched his home, they found an entire room filled with monitors, recording equipment, and stacks of hard drives. There were folders labeled with tenant names, some going back nearly a decade. Hundreds of unsuspecting people had been recorded in their most private moments, completely unaware they were being exploited. For Claire, the discovery was devastating. The idea that strangers could have already seen her studying, sleeping, or even undressing was unbearable. She had always been a private, cautious person, and now that sense of safety was shattered. Even after the landlord was arrested and charged, she couldn't shake the paranoia. She started covering every electronic device she came across, even at school or when visiting friends. She unplugged TVs in hotel rooms, taped over laptop cameras, and carried a small flashlight to scan for hidden lenses whenever she stayed somewhere new. Her friends thought she was overreacting, but Claire knew better. Once you've been watched without your consent, you can never go back to feeling normal. She eventually finished her nursing program, but the experience haunted her. Even in her new apartment, which she had inspected thoroughly, she sometimes woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling of being watched. She would scan the walls, the ceiling, every corner of the room before forcing herself back to sleep. The landlord was sentenced to several years in prison, but Claire never felt justice had truly been served. The footage of her and of so many others was out there, impossible to erase. The scars weren't just digital, they were emotional. The violation of privacy had left her with a deep, lasting wound, and what made it even worse was knowing how easy it was. Hidden cameras could be bought online for less than the price of a dinner. They could be disguised as clocks, smoke detectors, even charging cables. Anyone with a sick enough mind could invade the privacy of others, and most people would never notice until it was too late. For Claire, that knowledge was the most disturbing part of all, because while she was lucky enough to discover the cameras within a few days, she often wondered how many other people were still out there living in apartments, staying in rentals, booking hotel rooms, never realizing they were being watched. If these stories made you feel uneasy, that's because they're real reminders of just how fragile our sense of safety really is. We like to think of our homes, our rentals, and even our vacations as private spaces, safe havens, where the outside world can't reach us. But as you've just heard, sometimes the danger is already inside, silently watching. That thought alone is scarier than any ghost or monster. So the next time you walk into a hotel room, an Airbnb, or even your own apartment, take a closer look. Check the smoke detectors, the alarm clocks, the strange little devices plugged into the wall, because you never know who might be watching or worse, recording. If you enjoyed tonight's stories and want to hear more chilling, true experiences like these, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And if you've ever had a disturbing experience with hidden cameras or anything similar, share it in the comments below. You never know, your story might help warn someone else. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember,